Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. Last week, the United Kingdom raised its terror level to the second highest, severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. In the United States, a bulletin has gone out to several federal and state agencies warning of an imminent terror attack near or coming from the U.S. border with Mexico. Judicial Watch reports that Islamic terrorist groups are operating in the Mexican border city of Ciudad Juarez and planning to attack the United States with car bombs or other vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. High-level federal law enforcement intelligence and other sources have confirmed to Judicial Watch that a warning bulletin for an imminent terror attack on the border has been issued. Agents across a number of Homeland Security, Justice, and Defense agencies have all been placed on alert and instructed to aggressively work all possible leads and sources concerning this imminent terrorist threat. This is happening against the backdrop of another anniversary of the 2001 terror attacks on New York and Washington. For Americans, the designation 9/11 has come to stand for the events of September 11, 2001. We associate December 7th with Pearl Harbor and November 22nd with the assassination of President Kennedy. But only with 9/11 did we name the event for the day. For us, 9/11 signifies the horrible events of a day long past. But for terrorists, it's a holy day, a day to celebrate a past attack, and a day to launch new ones. America approaches the anniversary having acquired new global enemies and with a new blood-in-the-water kind of weakness drawing predators our way. And the USA makes a big, hard-to-miss target. The world is no longer a place of city-states, but of nations. We no longer build city walls. Cities are designed to welcome visitors, not to deter terrorists. That means the job of setting up a secure perimeter falls to the federal government, and in that, it is failing miserably. America's border vulnerability is especially egregious now. King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia recently warned that terrorists are once again turning their eyes westward. He said, if we ignore them, I'm sure they will reach Europe in a month and America in another month. Terrorism knows no border, and its danger could affect several countries outside the Middle East. He's certainly more than a disinterested observer. He would love for us to stop ISIS before they hit him. But his concern reflects the severity of the threat. In America, it's as if someone forgot and left the front door open. Texas Governor Rick Perry said that among those crossing the border illegally, we've seen historic high levels of individuals from countries with terrorist ties over the course of the last months. He also said there's a strong possibility that members of ISIS are already here. Joshua Keating of the liberal internet magazine Slate laughed off the whole idea. He said, as Perry acknowledged in his own remarks, and as the Pentagon confirmed, there's no clear evidence that this is happening. But as is generally the case when fears of al-Qaeda periodically emerge, a lack of evidence is no barrier to bold, sweeping claims. If by clear evidence he means the guns aren't smoking yet, just stick around and see what happens. A few weeks ago, on this program, we listed irrefutable evidence that the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah is present in Mexico and connected with the Mexican and Central American drug cartels. It is a fact, yet Keating went on to say, the frequent claims that this is already a major problem are, well, ridiculous. He made his claim that the concern was ridiculous on August 25th. On August 29th, the Texas Department of Public Safety issued a situational awareness bulletin to law enforcement personnel across the state. It said, a review of ISIS social media messaging during the week ending August 26 shows that the militants are expressing an increased interest in the notion that they could clandestinely infiltrate the southwest border of the U.S. for terror attack. The Mexican government may find it insulting that Governor Perry thinks that their border security is not up to par, but they can take comfort in the fact that the governor doesn't think U.S. border security is too hot either. With so many of the illegal aliens now crossing the U.S.-Mexico border coming from south of Mexico, it's obvious that their border is not secure. Also, sadly, the Mexican government is compromised by the power of the cartels and its own internal corruption. We can't count on Mexico to secure our border against terrorists. It's our job, and we have to do it at all costs. The man wading across the Rio Grande from Mexico into Texas did not look like the others we've seen making the crossing. The face seemed familiar, but unreal. In a bizarre way, the figure resembled Osama bin Laden. It was actually the documentary filmmaker James O'Keefe wearing an Osama mask. His point was obvious and chilling. This border is not secure, and were bin Laden alive, he could walk into the United States just like anyone else. The Obama administration long ago stopped using the expression war on terror. Mike Rogers, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, said, it is incredibly naive to believe that because you say the war on terror is over, the terrorists believe it is over. In reality, the United States and all civilized people are at war with Islamic terrorists, whether we acknowledge it or not. They're out to destroy this nation and everything good that it stands for, not just within the United States, but everywhere. We cannot deal with this problem until we stop denying its reality. ISIS presents a growing danger to the United States. In a short time, it will grow worse. But we must recognize it's already an immediate threat. ISIS today is feeling its oats. They're on a roll. They've grown from a small group to a major army in just a few months. They control 35,000 square miles of Syria and Iraq. In Syria, even a few months ago, they were just one among many rebel groups. Today, they're dominant. The Washington Post describes Abu Yusuf as a high-level security commander of the Islamic State. He said, in the east of Syria, there is no free Syrian army any longer. All free Syrian army people have joined the Islamic State. They're selling over $3 million in black market oil every day. That's not much compared to the U.S. military spending, but they are infinitely more efficient. They know that if they could make a big splash against the United States in the near term, young Muslim men by the tens of thousands would begin to stream to the Syrian and Iraqi desert to join in their deadly cause. To them, it is a matter of striking while the iron is hot. They think that if they can be bold enough, it could be checkmate in just a few moves. That belief is probably not true, but the conviction is still real, and it is the belief that makes them dangerous. James Inhofe, U.S. Senator from Oklahoma, said, we're in the most dangerous position we've ever been in as a nation. Speaking of ISIS, he said, they're crazy out there, and they're rapidly developing a method of blowing up a major U.S. city, and people just can't believe that's happening. Robert George, a Princeton professor of jurisprudence, said last week that ISIS is coming for us. They have every intention of getting here, and these are people who achieve what they set out to achieve. Unless somebody stops them, they make good on their threats. They have threatened to carry out activity in the United States, killing people, mass slaughter in the United States. Folks, the people that are making these statements are in the know. That is why we better take it serious that Christ's coming is even more near than we dreamed. The Obama administration refuses to label Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an invasion. It likes to use other words like incursion. Of course, if the Russians were driving their tanks down Pennsylvania Avenue, that might actually look like an invasion to the U.S. government. Why, even the White House might admit it. But that's what they are doing in Ukraine. They have moved a large invasion force of men and heavy weapons, including tanks, into the Ukraine. For a while, they were shooting into the Ukraine from the Russian side of the border. They were also sending weapons such as the anti-aircraft system used to shoot down the Malaysian airliner, and sending small groups of special forces in to help the Russian rebels inside Ukraine. They got away with all that already. So Putin thinks it's time to just send in the big guns. A Russian separatist leader admitted in a television interview that Russian troops were on the ground in the Ukraine. But not to worry, it wasn't an invasion. The troops, he said, were merely vacationing at the front. We also know that Russian paratroopers are in Ukraine. We know that because 10 of them were captured. But the Russian Defense Ministry says it was no big deal, just an accident. We have NATO satellite images of convoys moving across the border with tanks and heavy equipment. NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen told Reuters, "We see a continuous flow of weapons and fighters from Russia into eastern Ukraine, and it is a clear demonstration of continued Russian involvement." The Russians have an answer for those satellite images, too. And as silly as the other excuses were, this one takes the cake. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the satellite images turned out to be from computer games. Obviously, they don't care what anyone with a modicum of intelligence thinks. Notice that the NATO Secretary General used the word involvement, not invasion. At another point, he called the Russian action an incursion, apparently the preferred word among Western leaders. Ukraine's president, Petro Poroshenko, makes no bones about it. He calls it a Russian invasion. He knows that the word invasion requires something from American and European leaders, while incursion just means more of the same. At a press conference with President Obama, the Wall Street Journal's Colleen McCain Nelson asked the question directly. Do you consider today's escalation in the Ukraine an invasion? President Obama answered,
I consider the actions that we've seen in the last week a continuation of what's been taking place for months now.
When cornered on the question, State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki said, I think this is a discussion about terminology. It doesn't change what kind of support we're providing. But she's being somewhat disingenuous there. Invasion requires a strong response. Incursion doesn't. Invasion is a red line kind of word. At his press conference last week, President Obama spoke of the unwavering commitment of the United States to Ukraine, then reminded us that
Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but a number of those states that are close by are. And we take our Article 5 commitments to defend each other very seriously.
Article 5 is a commitment that each member of NATO will come to the defense of any other member that is attacked. Article 6 says that any attack on any NATO member will be deemed as an attack on them all. So, despite the president's unwavering commitment, he really doesn't believe the United States has an obligation to defend Ukraine. Otherwise, why did he make a point of stating that Ukraine is not a NATO member? He conveniently forgets that in a 1994 agreement known as the Budapest Memorandum, the United States, Ukraine, Great Britain, and Russia all agreed that if Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, we would defend its national sovereignty. They did, and we didn't. So far, we have refused to even send them weapons with which to defend themselves. If they still had nuclear weapons, Russia would not be invading them. The tragic lesson to all nations from here on out is simple. If you have nukes, keep them no matter what. If you don't have them, get them. This lesson will not soon be forgotten. In a speech at Brandenburg Gate just a year ago, President Obama said, "So long as nuclear weapons exist, we are not truly safe." Dreams of a nuclear-free world are now more remote than ever. By saying we will keep our word to NATO partners, the president is drawing yet another red line, or at least reaffirming one that was drawn a long time ago. 3 NATO members, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, were once part of the Soviet Union. Several others, including Poland, were Warsaw Pact countries, completely under the domination of the USSR. Vladimir Putin makes no secret of his desire to reunite the Soviet Empire. If in Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania he tries to do what he's now doing in the Ukraine, Obama seems to be saying that we will fight. To that, Putin recently issued a little reminder that he borrowed from Texas. It's best not to mess with us. He went on to explain why. I want to remind you that Russia is one of the leading nuclear powers. President Obama's stated support of NATO's Article 5 means that the United States will come to the defense of any NATO member that is attacked. But does anyone believe him? Most importantly, does Vladimir Putin believe him? I don't think so. Putin's reminder that his stockpile of 10,000 nuclear weapons, 2,000 of which are armed and ready sitting on rockets aimed mostly at the United States, was a clear message to Barack Obama. Back off. John Kennedy was the youngest man ever to be elected president. With youthful optimism and no small amount of pride, he went to a summit with Nikita Khrushchev. It was too soon for him. His better advisors admonished him to wait, but he was sure he could hold his own with the wily Khrushchev. Afterward, Kennedy described the summit to New York Times reporter Scotty Reston as the worst thing in my life. He savaged me. For his part, the Soviet premier left the summit feeling confident. He described Kennedy as too weak. Khrushchev's perception of Kennedy as weak would turn out to be wrong, but the perception itself took the world to the brink of nuclear holocaust by leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Another Soviet leader, Leonid Brezhnev, held a similar view of another American president, Jimmy Carter. He saw Carter as weak and naive, and it led to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. That led to the rise of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. That invasion ignited radical Islam into the raging global force we see today. We want our presidents to be men of peace and goodwill. We're the good guys, and we want good guys to lead us. But also, we want presidents to be worthy of the title Commander-in-Chief. President Obama admitted last week that he has no strategy to deal with ISIS. That's not surprising. He seems to find it increasingly difficult to pull the trigger on anything beyond domestic politics. We want a president who will never take lightly the use of military power, but we also need that president to be decisive. Procrastination is also a choice, sometimes a good one, but most of the time a deadly one. Leaders depend on more than armies or police. The best of them carry an inner authority. President Obama may have had some of that in the beginning of his presidency, but it seems used up now. The last days are perilous times in which to be president. But this isn't only about Barack Obama. It's about the decline of the United States as a world power, and the consequences are enormous. The world is falling into a chaos, and chaos is the devil's playground. Chaos will one day allow the Antichrist and the false prophet not to take over the world, but to receive on a silver platter a gift from the planet's population, eager for order, stability, tranquility, and some semblance of peace. Anything but more chaos. It's clearly predicted. Despite what my critics say, I have never claimed to be a prophet, but I can read the Bible and I can read the news. And I'm telling you that we are closing in on very dark times. It is essential that you keep spiritually strong. Stay in prayer. Stay in the Word. Learn the promises that supply your needs for the coming crises. Confess all your known sin and then pursue God's will so that you can remain in fellowship and be empowered by the Holy Spirit. And most important of all, it's time to lead people to Christ. There are many people around you right now that God has prepared to receive the simple gospel and be saved. You don't have to be a great, brilliant scholar who can give the 5 reasons why God exists and so forth. Listen to what the greatest scholar of God's theology said about this. And when I came to you, brethren, I did not come with superiority of speech or of human wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And my message and my preaching were not in persuasive words of human philosophy or wisdom, but in the demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not rest on the wisdom of men, but on the power of God. This was the testimony of the great Apostle Paul. He knew that the Greeks sought after human brilliance and superb oratory, but he knew that if he persuaded a person to receive Christ by mere human arguments, someone else would come along with a better argument based on human philosophy and talk him out of it. In our day, people want to be convinced by human arguments that the gospel is true. It's the same as then. We just need to share with the people the simple gospel that God so loved us, rebellious sinners, that He sent His only begotten Son to die for our sins and purchase an eternal pardon for them if we will receive His pardon by faith. Some who hear this will believe and receive Christ. Others will not. Just keep sharing the gospel until you find another that has been prepared by God to believe. As Jesus promised, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, He may give it to you. God is the one who has prepared us to receive the gospel. And when we receive it, He empowers us to bear much fruit through the Holy Spirit at work within us. This is the most important work we can do for God, especially at this time that is just before Christ descending in the clouds and shouting, "Come up here." The general time is here. All the signs in the last days' prophecies are happening before us. It's breathtakingly soon. Maranatha. Folks, this is the last week before 9/11. And I believe that we should be praying and on the alert, praying for our nation, and especially that God will take care of his people.